So the first question is, what is your native heritage or like tribal affiliation?
Okay, I'm from the Navajo tribe, and we're located. Our homeland is located in New Mexico. Well, actually, specifically from New Mexico, but our homeland is in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. And with the Navajo people, we are considered the largest native tribe across the country. So we have about over 300,000 tribal members in our tribe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say your life was like on the reservation, like in regards to your education, living conditions, like family dynamic?
Mm-hmm. I would say family dynamic was really good. We grew up in a very close-knit family, and we had all our families were nearby, so it was basically just, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, just everybody was so close. It was just very close-knit. But with the Navajo people, we are considered a matrilineal society, a clan society. So therefore, all my mother's nieces, or all my mother's nieces and nephews are considered my brothers and sisters. So vice versa, all my mom's sisters are also considered my mothers. And as a result, I had 3-4 aunts that lived close by. So it's just a matter of, we would get together and help one another. And then that means all my mother's nieces and nephews were my brothers and sisters. So while in reality I only have one true sister, but Navajo clan wise, I have 4 sisters and I have 3 brothers, and which makes the family a little bit larger. We didn't really grow up in we only had, I only had my parents and my sister, so we had a very small knit family. And I went to school on the reservation from elementary all the way up until high school, graduated. And for me, it was just a normal life. Growing up, we lived about 24 miles north of a border town, which is basically, being in the reservation, you have these towns that are on the outskirts around the reservation. Those are called border towns, and that's where we would have to go to do our grocery shopping or do all those other commercial stuff. So we would travel to go to the movies, to go eat out or something like that, and we did that more than once a week. And both of my parents worked for the tribe, so they were pretty much they would commute to work, and which would mean it was just me and my sister. And I guess that's where you have that close-knit family with my aunts, knowing that we were home by ourselves. They would come and pick us up, or making sure that we were okay, we were fed, etc., etc. The school systems on the reservation, it was a public school system, so therefore the education, I was top of my class. However, when I went to college, I was really behind, because our highest math class only went to like algebra 2, whereas many schools, any people that go on to college, they're coming from a school where they have a harder curriculum, and therefore they would have reached maybe like calculus 2 or something of that nature. So that was one of the downfalls, is not being very academically prepared when I had gone to college. Life on the reservation, I guess it doesn't really bother me, just because I grew up there. I was ingrained in everything. But it wasn't until I was in school, in college, undergrad, and I was talking about my life and how the conditions were on the reservation, that I had somebody tell me, I think it was a computer science class or something of that nature, something to do with computers. But basically, when we were talking about it, he's like, my group member says, you grew up in a poor environment. But I had never had anybody, I never saw it as poor. I never saw it as a deficit compared to what they were used to. So that was the first time that it was actually, I actually saw it as something less than. Whereas for me and anybody who goes on a reservation, it's just life. You're growing up there, you walk to school, you never lock the doors at home, everybody's family, everybody helps out one another. If there were ceremonies, we were there to help everybody else, and vice versa. If we had ceremonies, we would have family members come and help us out. So I think, for me, it was just a wholesome environment where I grew up in, and we had everybody around us. There were some issues there, of course, with all social issues taking place. There was alcoholism, there was all this other stuff. However, it really didn't affect our family.
Okay. So you had history classes?
Mm-hmm. We had history classes. We had I think I had an economics class, Spanish class, so we had all the curriculum that you would technically have for college prep. I was on a college prep track in high school.
Okay. And like, how much would you say like they focused on Native American history in the history classes? Like, was it just like a chapter in a book, or?
I really can't think about it, but we had New Mexico history, so a lot of that is deeply embedded with Native history as well as the Latino Mexican American history. But then it really didn't. It really didn't faze us because we were living there on the reservation. What they were displaying in the books was really something you would see from another tribe, from the Plains Indians, because typically, or I should say stereotypically, when people think of Native people, they automatically think of teepees and they think of, like images of people riding horses, etc., etc. But then looking at the history of it, it's more so that's what's more visible because that's what you would see in the media or you would see in books or in movies. So therefore, those particular teepee structures, that was something that then became stereotype for all Native people. But then growing up on the reservation, we had a different perspective because we knew what a Native home looked like. We knew the population of Native people, etc. But we also had and I think now it's becoming more prevalent on a lot of the reservations, is that you have to take a history course in Navajo history. So that way we know about the history of how our people came, we know about how our government structure was created, we know about the presidents, etc. within our tribe. So that's kind of, it's not the same as here because, excuse me, I have two daughters that went to public school here, and you're correct that, there's very little information revealed or information devoted to Native history, so that as a result they came up with a different perspective. And I know when my younger daughter just finished writing a paper about Native history, she focused specific on Navajo because that's where we're from, but then really giving more information than you would see in the textbooks.
Okay. So would you say like your friends and family and like people that you were around in the reservation, would you say like they wanted to be like a part of like other like outside of the reservation like America, or would you say they'd rather like be like left alone by like the American government or something?
It varies. I think you're looking at different generations. Mm-hmm. The older generation, they want to just keep things the way they are, and where Navajo is the first language, they still tend to actively participate in a lot of our religious ceremonies. They have all that knowledge, just given what was passed down to them. But however, you look at the younger generation, there's going to be some that don't want to acknowledge their Native history. They don't want to speak the language. I had mentioned previously our clan system. So when we are raised, we're taught how to identify ourselves with our clans. And so therefore, I know all four of my clans because I'm describing my mother's, her two clans and my father's two clans. However, a lot of this generation, current generation now, they don't know any of their clans. They just think they're from a specific clan. And along with that goes the language. I used to be able to speak Navajo a lot more, but given that I'm no longer on the reservation, and it's like with any language, it has to be continuously reinforced so you can retain it. And I know that I've lost a lot of my language skills, so when I go back to New Mexico, it's harder for me to talk, and I get my words mumbled, and I start messing up words, and my husband laughs at me, so forth. But then I know the language, but then this generation, there's no connection. They don't want to learn the language, and it really is just becoming in part of the dominant society. And it was interesting because when I was in school, gosh, I lived on the reservation more than 25 years ago. I've been off that long, but we didn't have, our population, I would say, was about 99% Native. We really didn't have, we had a couple of families that were white, and they were either teachers that were in this, where we went to school. We had a health center there, so we had maybe doctors that were there, and then religious figures like the Baptist minister or those other Christian Reform ministers. They were there. They were they were white, so therefore their kids went to our school. And our families, so we had very limited knowledge of how to interact with white people. And I still remember when this one teacher, one of the first black teachers came to school. She brought her 2 kids with her, and nobody had seen black people before. And as a result, there was some curiosity. I mean, we got to know them very well. But then this was, gosh, a long time ago, back when Magic Johnson used to play basketball. I'm not sure if you know that reference, but he was a well-known basketball player. And so the people, the older Native people in the community, thought that one of the teachers, her son was named Victor, and she thought all the black people, all the Navajo elders thought that one black boy was actually Magic Johnson, because that was their only exposure to him. So therefore, his nickname, he became known as Magic. And they grew up. I mean, they came as little kids, and they grew up. They graduated from high school. One of my sister-in-laws was really good friends with one of the girls there, and it was really interesting because after the fact, when I was talking with her, she said, I can't remember the girl's name. She grew up there in the community, clearly African American, but then she became such a part of the community that and when she graduated from high school, she wanted to go to a community where people were the same as her. So she went to an HBCU down south. I think it was in Atlanta someplace. And she didn't like it. She did not like it, just because even though she was the same skin color as everybody in the classroom, she was socialized differently. She spoke Navajo. She knew a lot of the Navajo traditions. And when I last talked with my sister, she said she actually moved back. So now she lives on the reservation, and now she's just, that's where she grew up, and that's where everybody's accepted her. But I guess that just kind of shows you, how she became socialized or became embedded in the community, and that's been her home ever since then. And I know she's married, she has kids there too. But I think it just shows you the dynamics, even though there's such curiosity. You coming here asking me questions about Native people, just know that there's such curiosity of our people about you all. They always ask, well, how are those Asian people? I always have my aunts would ask me, do they really, they see images on TV, so they're always asking me questions about that, and not only but Asians, but black people. We have a lot of curiosity about the Middle Eastern people, and so in my role when I go back, I help to provide that more accurate depiction, so that people won't see just what they see on TV. They're not. That's the limit. That's their limit to learning about other cultures. So for me to go back and to teach them about other cultures, that really helps them to get a better idea.
Okay. So what is your perspective on like mascots in football, like that are for like portraying like Native Americans?
Mm-hmm. It is a tricky issue, just given that I grew up in a family that was very diehard Washington fans. They grew up in that environment, and I think it really is a generational gap. You have a generation of like my father, my parents. My father was a diehard Washington fan. All my uncles, but then after really becoming educated, learning about what is the meaning behind that particular mascot, the definition, and I think that really helped to open a lot of eyes and perspective, and looking at how how the term is being misrepresented and how it's a derogatory to Native people. It really tends to put a different perspective on what you learn. So now you have a lot of the younger generation who are very against it. They want the mascot they want everything to change, and really just to be more culturally appropriate, because there's so much stereotypes that come out of it, as well as discrimination. You said you've been on YouTube. If you have a chance to watch, there is I'm not sure if it's a channel, but I know there's it's a Native community called 1491s. They do a lot of mock. They do a lot of videos, and there's one where they were filmed. They were on the Daily Show, and they went to a Washington game, and they were walking through, and you just hearing all the negativity and all the profanity and everything that was as they were walking, as Native people, that tends to be very disheartening, just looking how the rest of the U.S. society views Native people. But again, it's that whole the whole looking at the mascots and having those stereotypes and continuously reinforce them. So I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of changing that. We have a lot of, I work a lot with the Indiana Native American Commission here in Indianapolis, or Indiana. It's a statewide commission from the governor's office, and one of the biggest tasks is to help to change the mascots from a lot of these small schools around the state. And there was a school up in, I think it's Goshen. They're in the process of changing their mascot to make it more culturally appropriate. And I know it's Manual High School there in Indianapolis. That's another big, you see that big old image of that Indian up there. So that's one thing that we really want to do, is try to help educate the larger population in hopes to get that mascot image changed over.
Okay. Would you say that Native Americans are underrepresented in American society?
I would say so, just given the population figures. If you look at across the country, we are probably, here at Purdue, a good representation. We are less than 1% of the total population. It really reflects what's in the U.S. population as well, but it is what it is. We are a very underrepresented population, and some people really consider it to be an invisible population. Many times when I'm out, when I first moved to Indiana, I had people, they come up, they start speaking to me in Spanish first, but I said, no, I'm Native. And at that point, they're like, oh, well, I didn't know we had any more Natives left. That was one of the comments I received, which was really quite amazing. And I just responded, well, you didn't kill us all. But I think that seems to be a lot of it's part of history. When before contact, it's estimated we had over 20 million, I believe 20 million Native people across the country, but then that dwindled down to something in like less than 500,000, or maybe even more, less than that. But basically the population was just decimated due to disease, due to warfare, and just due to the westward expansion, taking the land over and trying to get rid of the Native people. And that's documented through U.S. history. If you look at a lot of what Andrew Jackson, his whole mission was to just to remove Native people across the country. And some of the policies that he made as president, that tends to really still hold true with a lot of Native people. And he's not one of the most favorite presidents of all the Natives, and that holds true even to this day. But it's part of history. But what we want to do is let people know that we do have a very active Native history, and we want to dispel those stereotypes that we are not what you see on TV. You see these savages hell-bent on killing people, etc., etc. But now we have Natives that are here going to school at Purdue who are looking to become the new tribal leaders. They're here to get their education so they can return back to their tribal community. And a lot of Native people, not Native students that I talk to here, there is that strong desire to return back to their tribal community or to work for a tribal community. Whereas when I ask the entire population, what are your goals? Oh, I want to look for a job that's going to make me the most amount of money or give me the highest prestige. But many of our Native students, they won't do that. They will take a job cut. We had a student here a couple of years ago. He was being recruited by the Environmental Protection Agency, NASA, because of all his research he did here. But he just said, nope, I'm going back to the reservation because he wanted to help his people. And I think that's what we really want to continue to support, that type of initiative, because we do need doctors, lawyers, and environmentalists, and all these different professional roles on the reservation, so that they're making decisions with the people in mind. A lot of decisions have been made in the past by non-natives, and it has really had a negative impact on our people. But now we're sending back our natives that are well educated to make those decisions.
And finally, what would you say? Do you think there's any type of way that we could possibly go about changing the way that people see Native Americans and making them understand Native Americans more and including them in society?
Mm-hmm. I would say just educate yourself. That's the big thing. Is look at your surroundings and that's a lot what we do here with our office. Our initiative with the cultural center here is really to help educate the broader population about Native issues. This coming week, we have all the publications here. This coming week, we're featuring Lana Aloha Lee, who is Native Hawaiian. We chose to focus on Native Hawaiian cultures this year just because a lot of people don't associate Native Hawaiians with Native Americans. But if you look at it, we are both indigenous to our homeland. So therefore, this is a good tool to use in raising the awareness to say Native Hawaiians have suffered oppression, have suffered a lot of the same issues that we have faced, but they're on a smaller island and everything. And that's the big thing, is just educate yourself. Go out, don't take things at face value. If there's a question, seek out an answer. If you come here, we can help with those answers, or just read an article of some sort. But there's a lot of good resources out there, and it applies to everything. There's so much that we can teach about our Native culture. But I think the biggest thing that we really want is to understand that, with Native people, we have the strong connection with Mother Earth, and we have such respect for Mother Earth, but that's not true with a lot of other cultures. And just looking at pollution and how, water has been misused and everything. So we want to really try to continue to make sure that we're doing that. And a good example I'll share, we had a student that was here a couple of years ago. She was studying about plants, and she was from the Navajo reservation, so she wanted to use a specific plant as part of her thesis. So she brought that plant back from Arizona. She brought it here. She used it in her whole thesis. And at the conclusion, the scientist, the botanist, says, "Oh, we want to catalog this. We want to keep it in our lab." But she said no. She says, I brought this plant here just to use as part of my study, but it's my duty to take it back. I got to give it back. That's where the plant belongs. It doesn't belong here." And the scientists could not understand that concept. But it's just, she says, I had to make an offering before I brought the plant over, because I wanted it to let Mother Earth, let her know why I'm bringing this plant here, and I promised I would bring it back. So those type of concepts still are very important to our Native people, and we want to make sure we honor those. So if people had that same type of, if everybody had that same type of respect for the Earth, maybe we would be in a lot better condition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm.